Hello, River of Life Community Fellowship. It is time for another midweek check-in. So today, I was just looking at Facebook, and I saw a post that just it caught my eye, and I want to talk about it a little bit. So this post, this person shared this post, and what this post said was basically if you think about working 40 hours a week in 5 days, the problem with that is that 2 days are not enough to recover from the 5 days of work. And I got to think about that. It was just something didn't seem right to me about that. Something just didn't seem to fit in my thinking. And so I got to think about it. How many hours a week are there? There are 168 hours in a week. And if we spend 40 of them working, that means that we have 128 hours to recover, to do other things, to get other things done. And it's that's a lot of time. That is really a lot of time. There's a lot of time, outside of our work that we have to do things. And so if we're having this extra 120 hours isn't enough to recover from the 40 hours of work, I think the problem is probably more, this is what's going through my head. The problem is more how we spend that 128 hours. Are we spending it in a way that helps us recover, or are we spending it doing other things? And that kind of started me on this train of thoughts where, I began to think about that, and I began to kind of process that a little bit, and just the thought that, financially, if people are having trouble financially, 90% of the time, their troubles aren't with how much money they make. Their troubles are with how they spend the money they make. And it's like that with this time, in my view. The problem isn't that 40 hours a week of work is too much. The problem is how you spend the rest of the 128 hours. And, that just got me thinking about, how do we spend our time, and what do we focus on, and are we focusing on the things that are important? And, when I was just thinking through that, I relate that to this series we're doing on politics and the intersection of faith and politics, and the blending of politics and faith, and how all that works together and how it should work together in our lives. It reminded me that, as we look at politics, politics are an important part of American life. That's so true. But in the life of a follower of Christ, they're not the most important thing in life. We are to be followers of Christ. Christ is supposed to be the most important thing. And what he tells us to do are to love God and love others. And he tells us to go and make disciples. So those should be the priorities in our lives. Those should be the most important things. But yet, we get the 168 hours of time in our week, and we spend so much of it dealing with things like politics instead of things like loving our neighbor. And as I was just kind of thinking through that, following that train of thought, in some ways, I just felt very convicted. With this coronavirus, the CDC just released information that so far this year, from January to the beginning of October, 300,000 more people than normal have died. That's beyond what normally dies in a year, 300,000 more. And that's kind of a heartbreaking statistic. Those are people that don't get the opportunity to hear about Christ again. Those are people who don't get the opportunity to choose Christ again. Their time is done. And that was just convicting for me. Is how am I spending my time now? Am I spending my time in a way that people can have the opportunity to hear Christ and to know Christ before their time is done? Because time is short. Time is running out. We're all going to die. We're all going to stand before God in judgment. And I want as many people as possible to know about Christ before that happens. And, and even Christ, when he was sending out his disciples, he was telling them, time's short. He said, go into this town, and if they reject you, if they don't accept what you're saying, shake your dust off the feet and move on. Don't waste time, trying to convince them or cajole them or argue with them. Just share the love of God. And if they don't accept it, move on, because time is short and there's a lot of work to be done. And that's so true even today. Time is short. People need to know. But yet we let ourselves get distracted by things like politics. We let ourselves get sidelined by things like the debates and what's best for our country and what policy is most important and what things we need to do as a society, when those things are important and those things are things that we need to deal with, but not to the detriment of people knowing Jesus. That needs to be our priority when it comes to how we live and interact with the people around us. Our priority needs to be loving others so that they may know that that God sent Christ to this earth. Like that's what God calls us to do, to go and make disciples. And so my encouragement to you today is to, as we talked about this weekend, to live out that law of Christ, to let that law of Christ inform your conscience, to help you see the things that are wrong in the world and deal with them, help your knowledge and wisdom that God has given you to influence and to guide you in that. But live the law of Christ, to listen to others, to learn from them, and to love them in a way that they get to know what the law of Christ is, that they get to know what it means to have someone love you so much that they'll die for you, to have someone love you so much, to have a God that loves you so much that he would leave heaven and die a torturous death for you. Like we need to help people to know that and to understand that. And so my encouragement to you is to live that out. Live out that law of Christ, just like we talked about this weekend, and, deal with politics, what needs to be done with politics, but don't let it distract you from what needs to be done, and don't let it cause division among you and other followers of Christ. Time is short and people need to know. So share the gospel and live under the law of Christ. Thanks, and God bless.